Hi, I'm Andrew, and welcome to the Breakpoint, PaymentIQ's roundtable podcast about iGaming payments and the people running them. Each episode, I sit down with my team and we get into the real stuff, the risks CEOs don't see coming, the revenue quietly walking out the door, and the conversations your head of payments is probably not having with you yet. It's honest, occasionally uncomfortable, and we think it's exactly what the industry needs more of. Let's get into it. So Neil, Tatiana, welcome. Long time. Not so long time. I saw you guys just in action.
Since when?
Yeah, exactly. So for our listeners listening back home, tell us a little bit about yourselves.
So I'm Tatiana. I'm product director within PaymentIQ, responsible for everything related to provider integrations. We have a huge portfolio of providers, more than 400, close to 500.
That is a lot, yeah.
Yeah, and it's actually an interesting job to keep building the new providers, but also take care about the existing portfolio. And it's not only about connecting these providers. We are in our team responsible for the payment flow. So it starts from the payment processing and then it goes to the integration with providers. So it's a big chunk of the payment processing. And yeah, that's why I'm quite enjoying in this position. I like the complexity.
All right. I'm Neil. I am the CEO of PaymentIQ. And, a little about myself, I think to keep it current, I'm at the best phase of my life where I have the opportunity to, get on this journey. And it's a super exciting journey that PaymentIQ is on. And my role is to help 100 individuals in this company optimally operate. And if I'm able to do that, then we as a company will be able to achieve what we want to achieve in the next short midterm.
Thank you, Neil. Thank you, Tatiana. So, a CEO in iGaming, right, is technically accountable for everything. But accountability and visibility, they're not really the same, right? Mm-hmm. And the biggest risks rarely live in the dashboard where the CEO actually takes a look at. They're in a spreadsheet somewhere where the head of payments, tends to present and manage with the CEO, hopefully. Or a provider relationship, that can change as well. Or a KYC workflow that hasn't been updated for a new market. And to be honest, how I see it is that this problem, it has three endings, right? You either have a regulator fine, a provider pulling out overnight, or a margin that's bleeding away quietly and silently without us actually knowing about it. Mm-hmm. But my question for you guys is really, when it comes to these dashboards that the CEOs are looking at, right? We tend to see rarely an alert unless something is actually broken. Does this design of how things are done tell us a little bit about our industry?
Yeah, I think, one thing that we need to appreciate is the industry is extremely volatile, right? If you look at multiple stakeholders like the regulators, the card schemes, and especially when you are operating in multiple markets, to be on top of every changing landscape in every market is a complex thing. So, and that's why, you are also quite heavily dependent on your compliance teams to be able to ensure that, we are, or when I say we, I mean the operators are operating in the right markets with the right kind of setup, and ensuring that the business is operating within the regulation, right? And there are several aspects to running the business when it comes to the setup, when it comes to payments, when it comes to ensuring that the right partnerships are in place to take care of several things. And that is where not everything can be captured within one dashboard, but there is dependency on your internal compliance departments, there is dependency on partners that you choose to work with, and at the end of the day, all the different pieces of the puzzle needs to kind of fit in.
I hear you, and to be honest, I agree with you that it's a multi-factor approach. But from your experience, how important do you think these multiple components are for ensuring that a CEO actually, is aware of a potential problem before it actually arises?
Yeah, so in my view, there are dashboards which they constantly monitor, but as Neil said, it's not possible to include everything into that. But it's important to highlight the risks, to provide the mitigation actions, and then to see the risks which exist, so the residual risk, and then the CEO can accept it or he can act on that. And this is the most important thing in that, because the complexity also on deeper levels. And I'm not sure that the CEO, with all the different aspects which he or she has to manage in the company, has this capacity to go into the deeper level to see that what exactly has to be done to mitigate risks. So just to give you an example, you mentioned in your question that, for example, PSP can be dead over the night. Then what can operator do? So there has to be a fallback PSPs where the flow can be simply, let's say, switched to just to prevent the interruption of the payment. Or let's say the QIC provider is dead over the night. So basically the same principle. Or if there is a regulator change in a certain market, and then 10 PSPs have to be updated to support that. This is not probably the CEO level details, but he or she have to be aware that this is something what can happen. Some of these things happens over the night, but some of these things can be definitely planned, and that has to be transparent for someone who is leading the company.
100%. I think that everything you said in terms of PSPs going down, compliance, like having issues with that as well, it's 100% something that is unavoidable and that can definitely happen. But talking about the iGaming industry in general, right? Compliance in the industry, we cannot deny that it's treated as a one-time setup, right? You set it and forget it. How do you think that this approach has had an impact on operators? And how do you think, for example, that this might have come back to bite them in a negative way?
So I think there are several ways, right? I mean, you touched upon regulator fines, canceling of licensing. Those are, significantly big impacts. But also, especially where we come from a payments perspective, losing a PSP or losing a market has a significant impact on the revenue as well. Yeah. So from that perspective, that's why I touched upon the fact that it's important to make sure that you have the right partners with the right expertise involved in your business and helping you in those specific areas. I mean, as an operator, payments is not your core business. Your core expertise lies in building the game and getting that out to the market, providing the best customer experience and things like that. And that's where you have specific partners or functions that have expertise in specific areas. And that is where, we come with our expertise as payment provider or an orchestration provider, where we understand the nuances around the requirements to be compliant, to be making sure that your business is, you don't get to a point where you lose a market. And how can we, to the best of our ability, make sure that we have multiple solutions or multiple options there? And one of the key things that we take away or support our operators with is the technological stack. So that's where we take the complexity from them to support them in a way where the technical stack is not becoming a burden on their business.
I hear you, and I think you're touching a very important point there, that it's all about the experts, partners that you have to make sure that nothing wrong can happen. But I mean, regulation changes, right? And markets change, providers change. At the end of the day, what is exactly the issue here? Is it the regulator? Is it the provider? Is it an internal audit? Like, what is exactly the sticking point here that an operator of any capacity has to pay attention to?
So then it comes to the regulation of the payment landscape. It's very complicated. So there are a lot of participants in the payment chain, and one regulation can affect a lot of, let's say, participants of this chain. And at least our customers, operators understand this complexity. But the thing is that it's extremely difficult to keep up with that, let's say. Yes, you need to understand that there is a regulation is coming, but you also need to understand what exactly in there has to be changed. And
What's
then
the impact?
The impact, yeah, exactly. And then you as an operator cannot influence on all the participants. So there is a lot of complexities in that. You need, for example, if you operate in 10 different markets, you can easily have 30 PSPs connected.
Or more.
And then you need to make sure that each of these PSPs is ready for the upcoming regulation, that you are ready, and that the technicalities behind this is updated. And what Neil said is where we are helping our customers at the moment. We are taking this complexity and then they can focus on their business.
But talking about, I want to focus a little bit on, first on the regulation part, right? Because you say we cannot control it. And that is a fact. But how can that, along with, the PSP issue, can actually affect an operator?
Oh, that's actually a good question, because if the PSP has an issue and the traffic, the payments are not going through, then it's a disaster for an operator.
100%.
Because we just had a discussion recently with Neil, and then maybe Neil can add on that. But then the customer is a checkout page. Then the worst thing which can happen is that the payment doesn't go through, and then this can affect on can have negative effect on this particular payment, so that it will be not processed. But the customer may also decide in the future that because the experience was so cumbersome, he or she will not come back. And this is the unnecessary, let's say, attrition, a negative impact for an operator. And now let's assume that the PSP is down for some time, like even for a few minutes, then it's already significant traffic. So keeping up the PSP up and running is essential thing.
Yeah, I think, we keep having this conversation every time because in my mind, that is one of the most important aspect of every business. And that is where, we as a payment orchestration platform offer the most significant value, right? So let's go to the start. So when we talk about people or consumers who are wanting to play a game, right?
Yeah.
They have multiple options, right? There are tons of operators that a consumer can choose to use, and that is where the entire chain starts, where the operator needs to attract consumers to come on their website and come and play on their domain, right? And that is where the customer acquisition journey starts from an operator perspective. And then you go through the acquisition journey through stages. And the final stage in the funnel is when you get a consumer to the payment page or the cashier, right? So at that point, the consumer who is on your cashier is the most expensive customer because you have had fall-offs at every stage and you have got someone there. So if you are losing a customer on the payment page, that is the most costly miss in the food chain, right? And that is why I believe that, there is significant value and upside, as we discussed earlier about, the 2% impact, right? So, even if you can impact your conversion rate by 2% at the payment stage, it may seem a small amount, but it has a significant upside to it considering the cost of customer acquisition.
Yeah, and customer acquisition is something that is a focus constantly, right, within operators, because it is exactly a pain. Because once you have the player come and then not place a deposit, then immediately you have a big problem. But going back into the iGaming CEO profile, right? What I've experienced is that a lot of them, so a lot of iGaming CEOs may think that they're protected because they have a team that focuses on their compliance, right? And the ones that are actually protected, they think about this a little bit differently when it comes to compliance. I would like to ask both of you now, do you agree or disagree with this?
So I think, you got to have the right team in the place. And if you have the right team in place, you would have to, depend on your team to do the functions that they're supposed to work on and manage, right? So, if I put myself in their shoes and I have a compliance department, then the job of the compliance department is, A, to make sure that the business is operating within the right regulations and framework, and B, if there is a risk, that risk should be flagged in time to make sure that the business can take the right decisions to ensure that the risks are mitigated, right? And that is where, it's a balance that a CEO or the business or the board needs to ensure between, the growth that you want to achieve versus the operating within the guidelines, right? That is what compliance is all about, to make sure that, you are operating within the prescribed guidelines and ensuring that the growth that you expect is sustainable. And, when you get those lines blurred a little bit, that's when your exposure is increased.
So if I hear you correctly, your way of thinking about this is more focused on actually giving a compliance team the responsibility to handle everything and then report to you. But I'm an iGaming CEO. I spend 16 hours a day focusing on commercials, going to events, talks, like a lot of things. How do you think would be the most functional and easiest way for a CEO to actually be aware of this? Because yes, you can give responsibility to the compliance team, right? But then if something goes wrong, who's accountable then? Is it the compliance team or is it the CEO?
I think the buck stops at the CEO, right? I mean, if the CEO is responsible for running the business, then every function of the business is his or her responsibility. So there is no getting out of jail saying that, oh, this is compliance's department's responsibility. At the end of the day, the responsibility of the CEO is to make sure that the risks are mitigated and the business is operating in the right way, and all the different people that you have with certain responsibilities are doing those responsibilities to the best of their abilities, right?
Yeah.
And that is where the CEO needs to work 16 hours, as you mentioned.
It's part of the job description.
Right, because there are so many different aspects of the business that you need to be on top of.
Yeah.
Just maybe to add that these teams, they exist, the compliance team, not without the reason, because the topic of compliance is a complex one. It includes multiple, let's say, dimensions, being it the payment risks or fraud or KYC or regulatory, let's say, changes around the globe. And there is no way that CEO can go into the details of every topic. So I think that's also responsibility of the team to make sure that everything what is happening is clear and transparent to the CEO. And then the CEO can make a decision or necessary actions about what has to be tackled, let's say, and what should become a priority.
That's the reason why, you have different people within the leadership of any organization. Everybody is a subject matter expert in their own domain, and 1% doesn't know it all. So that is why you hear everyone talk about having the right team, where you need to make sure that you have the right SME for every function to be able to provide you the right insight and the right advice for the CEO to take the right decisions for the business and steer the business in the right direction.
And I like that because you actually place a good point on the fact that a CEO does have to work long hours, 16 hours, let's keep it at that. And the important part here for a CEO is to actually involve the team into, the CEO's daily routine. She should be aware of what is happening at all times, especially when it comes to the payment stack, right, which is where the money comes in. This is very, very important. But circling back, if you could give a CEO right now, an iGaming industry CEO, you can give them a mental shift about how they perceive and think of the payment risks, what would you actually tell them?
So I would I would say that there is no right or wrong answer to this, because every company is at a different stage of their journey, right? And not one solution fits all. We see there are several operators who, believe in managing their own payment stack and taking full control and full accountability and full responsibility of managing that in-house. And there are several operators that work with payment experts in terms of companies like ourselves. And both approaches exist. And we have seen operators moving away from each other's approaches, and and that's why I say that there is no right answer to this, because of where they are in their journey and at that point in time. But I definitely see the value of being able to, engage or utilize experts from the specific payments domain has its own value in terms of the expertise that they can bring to the table, and also a very important aspect, which is, everybody keeps talking about the big tech companies around the world, and if you look at one fuel that powers them to be where they are today is data, right? And that's where the difference lies when you work with a payment orchestration provider. The intelligence that we bring to the table, the power is fueled by the data we sit on, whereas an operator has only access to their own data. Today, when we operate or support and work with 300 different operators around the globe, our systems are exposed to data worth 300 times. And that is the power of an orchestration platform in terms of the value that we bring to the table.
But here you focus on tactics at the beginning, because you mentioned, you can either go with doing everything yourself, or you can, work with a provider to do it. And then you shifted into a mindset, talking about data and actually harvesting the data to make best use of a provider's experience, right? Which is really, really important. But in terms of a mindset, right? And moving into that, what would you advise an iGaming CEO?
Yeah, so I actually completely echo what Neil said.
Yeah.
So it depends on the maturity of the company, on business objectives, on personal, let's say, tolerance to the risk of the CEO and of the company. But the decision has to be made based on the data. If you don't know what are the risks, how can you say that you are, let's say, accepting this risk, or you want to take some actions? So everything starts from having the right data, making the right measurements, understanding the risks, the impact, be aware, let's say, and then you can take a decision as a CEO what to do with that.
Look, I think, and the reason why I say that there is no right or wrong answer is because if you are looking at, a CEO's desk and his or her day-to-day schedule, it's basically jumping from one problem to the other, right?
16 hours a day, right?
And prioritizing, where do I spend that time on, and what is more important to be solved. So from that perspective, a company which is in a growth phase and is focused on the product and the tech does not have the bandwidth to focus on payments. So you got to balance that. And that is where, a lot of decisions are driven by where in your journey you are.
Yeah, for sure. And I actually like that point, because both of you have focused a lot on delegating tasks to experts and then actually reporting back into top management, right? The iGaming CEO. And I think this is really, really important.
Yeah, I think one word I would like to replace in your last statement is that you don't delegate tasks to partners or experts. You want to choose partners or experts who can be an extension of your team. There is a difference there, because I think, unless and until there is a strong partnership and a feeling that, okay, if I am choosing to work with provider A for a certain part of my business, they need to be an extension of our organization, where they have clarity of what's the direction in which we are moving and the pace at which we are moving. That alignment needs to be there. Otherwise, the partnership is like a delegation, which doesn't work.
Yeah. And then right words by an actual CEO on the table right now. So that really shows, which is great. And now for my last question for both of you. Because we will have a lot of iGaming CEOs actually listen to us talking today. And the ones listening to this will probably have delegated their payment risk and kind of have the assumption that these happen, right? Or gave the payment risk to partners.
Yeah,
which is the correct way. What do you think the one question should be that the CEO should ask their team or their provider who's handling this risk? What do you think this question should be tomorrow morning? And what should they focus on?
Yeah, I think, when it also, again, depends on what is the setup, right? So as a CEO, if I am running a business where my payment stack is managed in-house, then I don't really have benchmarks to go with, right? I am looking at, whether my acceptance rate from a particular market is at 80%, 90%, 70%. It is what it is. What I would like to see is how do we stack against our competitors in the market? How are we doing over there? What kind of coverage are we offering? I would like to see what are the reasons of drop-offs where we lose transactions or customers in the payment funnel right at the end on the cashier. So those are important aspects and data that I would like to see in order to make the right decisions and manage my strategy to improve my acceptance rate. And as we all know, acceptance rate improvement of even a 2% has a 20% impact in the overall cost of customer acquisition and the revenues.
But one question. What would you ask the iGaming CEO straight up? What would be the first question that you think an iGaming CEO should ask their team in 5 words, for example?
If I would be CEO, let's say, I would ask, what are my primary risks? Let's say, what is the risk for license to operate? What is the risks, financial risk, let's say, for processing payments, where we see direct potential money loss, let's say, and how to prevent this? How to make sure that we don't lose our license tomorrow because some of the providers or we are not compliant. Then what are the risks from the fraud perspective? How are we and our technological stack is mature against fraudsters, especially now then AI is out in the open and then every engineer can try to do, let's say, different things to test the system from the fraud perspectives. So these kind of understanding CEO needs to get to make the priorities.
So there isn't really a single question, right? It's more of...
Yeah, it's never a single question, right? And that's because the business is complex.
Yeah.
And as I said, it's a puzzle, so every piece of the puzzle needs to fall in its right place. So as a CEO, there are various aspects of the business, whether it's technology, whether it's compliance, that needs to be looked at and continuously monitored and measured. When it comes to revenue, if you're talking to your chief commercial officer, your questions will be different.
Yeah.
Whereas where you're talking to your chief risk officer, your questions will be completely different. Because you are tackling different aspect of the business. But, the bottom line is, how do I increase my revenue while having complete control on my exposure and risks.
For sure. I think, all in all, today we discussed a lot of different points, and it seems like we tend to circle back on a CEO being responsible for an iGaming business and also having to focus also on partnerships to make sure that all these holes are kind of patched and kind of having no issues eventually, and harvesting a lot of the data from different kind of partners that can help you kind of focus and improve the business and make sure that everything kind of flows smoothly. Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, thank you both. It's a pleasure. I think we've had a very fruitful conversation today, and we've had a lot of interesting talking points, which I think our listeners would be more than happy to actually listen to, maybe in the car or at home or whatever, or while cleaning, you know.
Right.
I tend to do that as well. Thank you, Neil, Tatiana.
Thank you,
Thank you.
Andrew.
Thank you very much. Nice speaking to you.